Hey, and welcome back to New Horizons Designs on YouTube. This is a community-driven sewing channel dedicated to helping you enhance your skills and make your sewing journey and your sewing practice just a little bit more fun and exciting. If this video is helpful for you and you want to help us out, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons. I'm Kate, one of the contributors here at New Horizons Designs on YouTube, and today we're talking about the Elevation Hoodie, or bunny hug as we call it here in Saskatchewan. There's a few tricky bits, but nothing you can't handle, so grab your supplies and let's dive in. This pattern suggests fabric using at least 35% stretch plus some ribbing, also with 35% stretch. I didn't use ribbing, I just used my regular fabric just because I wanted that cohesive look and I don't have any ribbing on hand. Because I didn't use ribbing fabric, my pieces were maybe a little bit tighter, so if that's the case for you, you might want to just add a tiny bit to your sleeve cuffs and your hemband just to make sure that it's going to fit the circumference of either the sleeve or the bottom of the bodice. Alright, so the fabrics I'm using are 3 different fun fabrics. The first one, this nice pink dusty rose type color, is a regular cotton French terry. I believe it was from the Fabric Snob. I just had a remnant in my stash and it's super cozy and went perfectly with this, so we used it. The olive is a bamboo fleece that I got in a D stash, but I believe it originated from Water Tower Textiles. This bamboo fleece is like incredibly soft. It was really hard for me to share this cut of fabric with my daughter. I also used some really soft organic French terry that I picked up from Sheer Perfection Fabric. You'll also need a scrap of interfacing. If you don't have any iron-on interfacing or any interfacing at all, you can use a piece of woven fabric, so like an old sheet or an old button-up shirt or a pillowcase, something like that. Just cut it out to the size of the interfacing piece and then just baste it on to your fabric piece within the seam allowance so that it'll never be seen. For the hood pieces and the grommets, what you can do there is you can just use some craft glue or some wash away wonder tape or something like that to stick it on, because the grommet, once you have the grommet on there, it will actually hold it all together. You also might want to use grommets and drawstrings. These are totally optional, but they do add a nice little touch to the finished hoodie and make it a little bit more ready to wear if that's kind of what you're going for. This grommet kit I picked up on Amazon. We will definitely have the link to that or something similar in the description box below. So if you're interested, make sure you check that out. Oh, and this braided suede drawstring, super cute. It is from Sheer Perfection Fabrics as well. Alright, so after I gathered my supplies, I wanted to make a few alterations to the pattern pieces. So I took the hood and I made a 3-piece hood pattern. That's just personal preference. You definitely don't have to do that. If you are interested in learning how to do this, I do have a video on my own YouTube channel and we will leave the link for that down in the description box, so thanks for checking that out as well. I also shortened the bodice by 3 inches, so the front and the back. I did this on bodice piece C. I also shortened the sleeves by 3 inches, but the sleeves were just too short in the end, so I just ended up making longer cuffs, so I don't think I would recommend shortening the sleeves. Make sure you double, triple check your measurements. Yeah. Once the pattern pieces were all ready to go, I sorted them into the different fabrics. So for fabric pieces A, B, and C, I just kind of sorted the pieces out, put them in the piles, and then I knew which pieces needed to be cut or which. I'm all about planning and prepping ahead of time, so it's so much easier when you get to the actual work. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to cut the pockets or what colors I was going to use for the pockets, so I kind of left that till the end. And then for the hood, because I chose to do a lined hood, and if you're doing a lined hood, make sure you cut that out twice. So in my case, I was using the pink and the green, doing a full hood for each of those, and then they would be combining to form the lined hood. Now, when you move on to cutting your fabrics, make sure you mirror your pieces. This can be done either by folding your fabric onto itself so that it's either right sides together or wrong sides together, so that you have 2 pieces of mirrored images of that pattern piece, or if you're just cutting in a single layer, you want to put your pattern piece down one way, and then when you go to do the mirrored image, you're going to flip the pattern piece this way so that you have two pieces that are now mirror images of each other. This is extremely important for the sleeve pieces and the pocket pieces because they are not symmetrical. They are not symmetrical to itself like the bodice is, where the one side of the bodice matches the other side of the bodice. The front of the sleeve is not the same as the back of the sleeve, and you need to be really, really careful that you have that done properly. Ask me how I know. So take your time to get it done right the first time to save you frustration later on. Also keep in mind, if you're using a directional print or a stripe or something like that, this design has some really cool features that would play really well into some really funky pattern placement. Okay, next I interfaced my pocket pieces. Again, I'm gonna say it, don't forget to mirror your pieces. This is especially important if your fabric doesn't look like it has a right or a wrong side. It can be really easy to get mixed up or slipped up on that. So just make sure that they look mirrored when you're done. The digital instructions have some really good pictures to help you out to make sure that you have your pattern pieces mirrored properly. Okay. So interfacing. You could totally just use the pattern piece and cut out two pieces of interfacing for the pockets and slap them on there and iron them down and you'd be done. But that's not how I like to do things. I like to do something called block interfacing. So it's when I take all the pieces that need interfacing and stick them down onto one large piece of interfacing, iron them, and then cut them out after, and then usually I iron them again. But this isn't the greatest example, number one, because it's only two pieces of fabric that need to be interfaced, and number two, because my scrap of interfacing was the exact same size that I needed for this pattern. But it's the same idea. Essentially, you just slap it on there and iron it and then cut off the excess. It just, I don't know, it just seems to make things faster, and then you're not fussing around with little pieces of interfacing and they always get stretched out and you have to trim them off after. Anyway, it's a whole big ordeal, isn't it? Just block interface, it's so much easier. And then the little strip that I cut off, I'm actually gonna use for my grommets later on. Okay, finally, it's time to sew. We're finally getting to the sewing. Most of the pattern is pretty straightforward, but there are a couple tricky spots that are worth going over. I will say the best thing you can do to get a nice crisp point like we want on our sweater is to take your time. Do the preparation, do the work ahead of time. Preparation is key. Oh, and don't skip the basting. I know you want to. I know you want to. Don't skip the basting. Okay, so we first need to construct all the color blocking to form the full bodice, front and back pieces, as well as the full sleeves, so we can, you know, make the whole garment like you normally would sew. This is the tricky part. I'm gonna follow the pattern directions so that we can kind of work together. You can have it open on your own computer or your phone or print it off or whatever, and we can follow the same order so that we don't really get too mixed up here. So we're gonna start with the back bodice piece. So take your back bodice piece C, lay it down on your work surface right side up. Now take back bodice piece B, your middle strip there, and just place it above that, kind of how it'll look when it's all done. Just so you have a sense of what it's gonna look like and where it needs to align. Now take that piece and fold it down onto bodice piece C so that they're right sides together, and bodice piece B is upside down, and that bottom point is touching the inside point of bodice piece C. Again, the pictures in this instruction booklet are really, really well done. So between that and this video, you should be okay. Okay, so at this point, it's not going to align at all. The only thing we have lined up are that outside point of bodice piece B and the inside point of bodice piece C. The rest doesn't look like it's gonna line up, but just wait for the magic. So take that bodice piece B, the outside point, we're calling the outside point, and you're going to measure 3/8 of an inch down from that point. This is your seam allowance. Make a very defined dot here. That is very, very important to the success of your points. Okay, next on bodice piece C, we're gonna measure down about 1/4 inch and we're gonna snip to that point. Only through bodice piece C. Do not snip through bodice piece B, only through that bottom bodice piece C. You wanna make that 1/4 inch snip. You can go a little bit further, but definitely do not go up to where your stitch line is going to be, or you'll end up with a hole in your garment. All right, If your piece is moved around a little bit, that's fine. Just realign that point, that outer point of bodice piece B with the inner point of bodice piece C. Make sure that those points are touching together and everything is kind of square. And stick a pin right into that dot you made at bodice piece B and put it through both layers of the fabric and secure it there, pointing downwards, so we're not going into the seam allowance there with our pin. Now you're going to pull one side of bodice piece B up to align with the edge of bodice piece C. You'll notice that once you pivot this piece, that point from bodice piece B is going to pivot as well, and it's going to overhang that dot we made. That's perfectly exactly what you want to look like. That is your seam allowance. So that's why if you were to just line up the side pieces as they were and not make that dot and have it overhang, it's not gonna turn out properly and you're not gonna have the fabric, it's just gonna be a mess. So do this dot preparation and it'll turn out just great. So place some clips along that long edge and now you're going to baste it. We're gonna start at the outside and we're gonna baste down into the center, making sure to stop at that dot. I like to baste at 1/4 inch because then I don't have to pull out my basting stitches later on. If you want to use 3/8 of an inch, that's totally up to you, but I found using 1/4 inch seam allowance for my basting worked great. Just to clarify, basting means using your regular straight stitch machine on a regular stitch length or a longer stitch length so it goes faster and it's easier to pull out. Not using your serger or a stretch stitch. We're just basting it, okay? This is just to keep things in place while we work.
Don't skip it! Don't skip it!
Okay, now we're going to repeat this process with the other side of the bodice pieces. So bodice piece B that we had just pulled up to the one side, we're now going to pull it up to the other side. This is what's going to make your V. This is the tricky part. It's kind of can be tricky to get that center point all smoothed out and stuff. Just do your best. We're gonna again work from the outside edge or where the side seam will eventually be and stitch using a basting stitch down into that center point, again stopping at the dot. I did mine from the back side so that I could sew with the, you know, where your seam allowance is on your right side. So of course my dot wasn't there. What you can do is measure down 3/8 of an inch again when everything is nice and flat on the back side, or you can just go up to your stitching because you know that stitching stopped right at the dot, right? Right. The clip that we made earlier is going to help the bodice piece C spread out so that you can get to that position, and as you're sewing, just kind of smooth things out as you go. Take your time, take it one stitch at a time once you get to that closer center part, and I think you'll do just fine. You might need to clip a little bit further, but again, be careful that you're not going into the basting stitches or the stitch line or where your seam is going to eventually be. All right, so now once you have your basting stitches done, you can admire your handiwork, make adjustments if you need to, and then carry on with either your stretch stitch on your regular machine or your serger. I do recommend doing 2 separate stitches, one from each outer side down into the center. It just makes that point just a little bit more crisp. Now you're gonna repeat this process with bodice piece A, so the top part of the back bodice, onto this new unit that you created, attaching it to the middle strip there, bodice piece B, and then repeat the entire process for the front bodice piece as well as the 2 sleeves. When you do get to the sleeves, again, make sure that you have your fronts on the same side as your fronts and the back on the same side as your backs. It won't line up properly, you'll be frustrated, it'll be all crooked. Just make sure the fronts are with the fronts, the backs are with the backs, everything is lined up the way it should be. Take the time to figure that out. Use the paper pattern pieces so you have everything just the way it should be, and you'll be fine. Trust me, you'll be fine. Whew. Okay, let's take a quick break so you can hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps out YouTube channels like ours grow and evolve and bring you the content that you are craving. So thanks. All right, break time over. Time to do the welt. It just never ends around here. These are a little bit of work, but they are so worth it for the outcome. So the first step is to take your paper pattern piece A and you're gonna cut out that long skinny rectangle. We are going to need this piece for the next step, so make sure you keep it close by and don't totally obliterate it when you're cutting. So now lay pattern piece A onto the back side or the interface side of your pocket piece A. Again, you're gonna have the two pieces there. There should be mirrored. We're working on the back side, which has the interfacing on it. So make sure that you line that up properly on the pattern piece. Now take a pencil or a pen or a fabric marker or chalk or whatever you have, trace around that rectangle, making sure that everything stays in place and it's just the way it should be. Then you can remove that paper piece and then grab the little rectangular paper piece that we cut out, lay it on top of your fabric piece where we drew the rectangle, lay it right over that, aligning all the edges so it lines up where it's supposed to be, and take something like a pin or a seam ripper or a pen or something and make a hole in where those holes are or the dots are on the pattern piece and mark those on to the fabric pocket piece. Then you're going to take the paper pattern piece for bodice piece C, the front bodice. We're working on our front bodice now for the pockets. You're going to take that pattern piece, and I found it easier to cut that rectangle out again. And then I just lined up the bottom edge of the pattern piece with the bottom edge of my bodice and the side seams because those have not been touched or sewn or anything. So I know that that's where that should line up. And I marked the pocket opening on there as well with my water soluble fabric marker. Now you're going to take that fabric pocket piece where we marked the rectangles and the dots on the back side of it and lay it right sides together with the front bodice, aligning those rectangles right on top of each other. Again, make sure you have the right pocket piece. The bottom curve of the pocket should be pointing down to the bottom of the bodice. Pin this in place and sew directly on that rectangular outline that you made on all four sides. And now you're gonna cut it. Yep, you're gonna cut right through your bodice and everything. So cut between those two dots on the long ways. You're gonna cut a straight line between those two dots, and then from the top dot and bottom dot, you're gonna cut to each of the corners diagonally, and you're gonna cut from the dot to that corner, being very, very careful not to stitch into your seam that you just made. You wanna stitch just up to the corner, but do not snip the thread. Okay, now you can pull that pocket through the bodice to the back side and press it flat from the front. Isn't this cool? And then press it flat from the back side. How cool is this? From the front side, it's like totally clean. Welt Pockets always amaze me. Okay, so as it's laying here, the longer side of your pocket should be towards the center of the bodice. We're gonna take that piece and pull it back over the pocket opening to the outside or the outer edge or the side seam portion of the bodice and lay it there and then press it flat. Watch the heat on your iron so you don't, melt your interfacing like somebody did here. Okay, now we're gonna make a mark 1/2 inch away from that seam that you can see. We revealed that rectangular seam there from the opening. We're gonna mark 1/2 inch away from that stitch line onto the interfacing of the pocket. And now we're gonna fold at that point along that mark back onto itself. So you kind of have like the start of an accordion fold going on here. And this folded portion should be covering up the opening that we made in the bodice. That's gonna be your pocket opening. Okay, we're gonna go a little bit off script for this next part. Okay, so what I did was I grabbed that fold at the bottom of the pocket, the fold that we just made, I grabbed it all at the bottom of the pocket like a little sandwich, and I picked it up. And then I grabbed the bottom of the bodice and I kind of like folded it underneath, and then I flipped the whole thing upside down. So now what I have on the bottom is the pocket fold that we made, and then on top is that little triangle from when we cut the welt pocket into the front bodice. And what we want to do is we want to sew over that little triangle right on the same stitching that we originally made. This is going to secure that fold in the opening and just make everything lay the way it's supposed to. So I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, the instructions are pretty good. I just found this way to be a little bit better for my own understanding. And then you're going to repeat that on the top of the pocket portion. So again, grab that little sandwich, pick it up, flip it over, stitch over that triangle, and then look at the front and admire the magic that is Welt Pockets. Lastly, smooth it all out and top stitch over that rectangle again from the right side of your bodice. And then repeat it all for the second Welt Pocket. And you're done. You're done the Welt Pockets. Woo, you did it! Okay, now to attach the two pocket pieces on the inside, so we're working again on the back side of the bodice now, you can either take them and sew them wrong sides together, which will give you the seam on the inside of the pocket, Or you can do like I did and pull it kind of around itself so that the two pocket pieces are on the other side of the bodice. So you're actually gonna be working on the right side of the bodice. Pull those pocket pieces around so that they're right sides together and stitch them that way. This is gonna mean that the seam allowance from that pocket is between the pocket and the front bodice. So it's not gonna be in the pocket at all. So now flip your pocket back over to the back side of bodice, the front bodice, and then to complete the pocket, we're just gonna take pocket piece B, lay it right side down, so right sides are together on top of that pocket that we just made, and stitch around all four sides, being careful not to catch the bodice piece anywhere. It's pretty easy. And then flip it over, make sure everything's all laid out smoothly, and you're gonna top stitch on that rectangle just on the outer sides. So just along the outer long stitch line of the opening there. All right, the rest of the construction is pretty straightforward. You're going to attach the front and back bodice at the shoulder seams, then you're gonna make the hood. Now, I added some extra embellishments to my hood, those little pocket squares. Totally not necessary, I just like doing it for a little bit of extra interest. If you're doing a lined hood, again, I did a 3-piece hood hack and I made my hood lined, and I also chose to do grommets. If you need some help with your grommets, I have a grommet video on my YouTube channel and you can check that out in the description box below. So then you just attach your hood to the bodice, throw the sleeves on there, sew up the side seams, attach your cuffs, your waistband, thread your drawstring, and voila! So thanks so much for watching this video. The Elevation is a really unique design and personally, one of my favorites, and it's just something different and it just adds a little bit of interest. And I mean, you know, you see things like this online and now you can recreate it super easy, and you know how to do V-points and you know how to do a type of welt pocket, and I think that so I hope this video was helpful in kind of tackling those things that maybe you think are more difficult than they actually are. So if it was, again, make sure you give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so we can catch you in the next video. So until then, bye!